It is a great pleasure to be back in Belgrade participating in the official launch of the Summit 100. I love this city, the atmosphere, and of course, because it's not too far away from where I grew up in Skopje, Macedonia. And I also love the concept, the whole concept of business, getting together, thinking of what can be done, working collaboratively, also suggestions for government. So the whole concept of the Summit 100, a new deal for a new age, is something that's very close to my heart, and I really wish you well and wish you the perseverance for you to drive this in the future. My topic today, what Maya asked me to do, and she's a very good taskmaster, but she asked to talk about leadership, and then I said, well, can you give a little bit more details? I don't want to waste my time, and even worse, I hate to be wasting your time talking about things that may not be appropriate or that may not be useful. So she asked, make sure that don't overdo my time and allow time for Q&As. But she thought it'd be very useful if I cover 5 topics. And those 5 were, I normally don't use notes, but that would be useful to use notes so I don't go on for 5 hours. But the first was to provide some background on my, quote-unquote, my life story. Second, philosophy and leadership, and discuss some of my successes, but also some of the lessons learned from my career. 3, to provide some views on the current economic environment, and if I have any views on when the environment may actually change for the better. 4th, and again, very close to my heart, particularly the last 10 years, any personal views on what's required to be successful in a developing economy, both to drive growth, but also to drive improved competitiveness of local companies. And last, to take the liberty to make some recommendations to this group. So the approach I'll take is I'll try to cover all 5 of them and allow 20 or so minutes for Q&A at the end. And although I'm very tempted to go back to Skopje as early as possible, today Maya had asked me to stay for the lunch, for the breakout sessions, and for dinner tonight. So if there's any questions that you'd like to follow up during the breaks or dinner, I'll be around till 6 o'clock tomorrow morning when I'll be driving over to Skopje. Dobro, does this sound like a plan? Yeah, all right, very good. Life story, and again, abbreviated. I was born in 1953 in Skopje, the old Yugoslavia, and I lived through a very significant flood in 1961, big earthquake in 1963, and she lost some really close friends and 4 family members, aunts and uncles. We lived in a 2-room, not 2-bedroom, a 2-room house. One was kitchen. The other was the room where my parents, my sister, and I slept. Outside toilet. Not much money, not many material goods. When people ask me, how was your childhood? I always use one word. I just say, terrific. And it's not a joke. I had very supportive parents, great friends, very demanding schools. I think we had great teachers. And at least at that time, Yugoslavia was doing so well relative to competition, quote-unquote competition. The other Warsaw Pact countries. Not other, but versus the Warsaw Pact countries. So as a kid, there was a good morale. There's a good momentum in the country. My personal goals, frankly, are 2. 1, to be a professional soccer player. I was hoping to be the next Čakularac or Osim. Osim was actually my height. Or to be a politician. I think all kids at that time were aspired to be politicians or athletes. So life was good. I was a good student, good athlete, and I was really happy in the environment. Then the world turned upside down in 1969. My father had gone to visit his sister in the United States in 1966. For the next 3 years, that's all he talked about. We should move to the United States. We just didn't think it was going to happen. Then all of a sudden, the paperwork came, and we left in March 1969. I was 15 and a half, very unhappy to be leaving the place I loved. And we moved to the United States on a Thursday, and speaking this much English, no friends, very impaired confidence, went to a regular high school, to gymnasia, on Monday. So talking about shell shock. And my parents actually were age 56. My mom couldn't have kids for a long time, so she was 56, my dad was 57. again, to move to a completely new country, not speaking a word of English. They both worked in factories in the Cleveland area. And I still remember they bought a home, which was a 15-year mortgage, and they hated debt. They just did not want to have the obligation to owe money to somebody else, and they paid it off in 4 years. I mean, they worked 12, 16 hours a day. They're so determined to have my sister and I to be successful and not to be liable to a bank. And sometimes I think that a little lesson would be well served for many companies and many governments today to live within your means. But I was also fortunate. There's a very welcoming community in the U.S., Serbs, Slovenians, Croats, Macedonians in the Cleveland area. I picked up a new sport, swimming. My high school did not have a soccer team. And although I was still very homesick, I was starting to become acclimated in the community. I went to college on a swimming scholarship. I was a math major, took a number of business classes. I was fortunate enough to be selected to be the captain of both the soccer and the swim teams at the university. And actually had a chance to swim for Yugoslavia in 1972, the Munich Olympics. Decided not to do it. Mistake, I still regret it. But the view is I'm not a great enough swimmer relative to other American swimmers, so I thought it would be a fraud to actually go swim, get a major mistake. In 1975, when I graduated from university, I was recruited to play professional soccer. That's when Pele and Beckenbauer were playing in the U.S. Made a decision. I wasn't good enough or fast enough to make a living in soccer, and I went into business in 1975. So more than 35 years ago. I'm a long student of leadership in politics, military, history, sports, but most important, in business. And here I'll give you a commercial, and this lots of times does not appeal to many European audiences, but I think business is a very noble profession. And I think to be a great manager, a great employee in a great company is an absolute gift to society. If I say this in France or Spain and many other countries, somehow there's the idealism of politics and what you can do for society and many other things, and somehow business is put at the bottom. And I just come from the opposite side. A great business with ethics and what you can do for young people to provide opportunities for the future, what you can do for society is second to none. So I'm a very strong supporter of strong societies, high quality of living, but I do think that business is at the heart of what makes great societies. I never apologize for it. Like everything else, business is not perfect. There's many things we do not do well. But as a business leader, if you can motivate your employees, if you have a strong vision, I mean, that's frankly as wonderful a job as you can have. But before discussing my career, again, with General Electric, 25 years, 5 years at Motorola, 4 years at Nortel. I've been a Boeing director for 7 years. I've had a chance to meet some of the greatest business leaders of our generation, and I look forward to providing some background. But before that, you cannot give your life story without making at least a couple of comments about your family. And my parents unfortunately passed away, my mom back in 1978, and my father in 1991. And when people ask you, Mike, don't you wish your parents were still alive to see your successes? And I says, well, of course I do. I love my parents. But my first job at age 21, when I went to work at General Electric with a tie on, college graduate, I mean, my parents thought I won the jackpot, the lottery, so they certainly thought I was very successful at age 21. So I think of them very fondly, but not, boy, I wish they were here to see how successful I am. I'm married to Robin, 28 years. She had a great career at General Electric, decided to stay home. We have 3 boys. Oldest one is age 26, VP International for Groupon, which is one of the fastest growing companies in the world today. And he works out of Korea, Seoul, Korea. My second son, Kirk, is 24, works in sports marketing. And our youngest boy, I mean, he's 2 meters and 9 centimeters, is a 20-year-old at Duke University. He actually plays basketball for Coach K, Coach Zafirovski, who's also the coach for the U.S. national team. So that is my background. It took 8 minutes to give you a background for on my business story, my life story. Second, my views on leadership and some of my successes and also lessons learned. First of all, I do think it's very important for corporations to have values that they're proud of and in which they communicate broadly to their employees, customers, and suppliers. But I think it's just as important to have your own leadership values and that you be proud to explain to your employees, to your customers. And I have those, and they actually go back 25 years. It's October 1st, 1986. Obviously, you can figure out how old I am today. But it was my first president and CEO positions. I'm age 32, and totally unexpected, Mr. Welch asks me to run this small company. So I have a week to prepare. Said, well, I'm going to tell 400 employees that I'm their new president and CEO. I've never done anything operationally before. There was a company in Seattle, so I thought it was very important to explain to them how I will approach the task and what the expectations I will have from those employees. And this is on one page, and every time I have a new job, I always bring the same page. Obviously, you adapt it to the current business challenge. But those guiding principles, nothing revolutionary, but the importance, like most things in life, is how determined and how you actually apply your behavior to what you say you're going to do. First one, delight customers. Again, this is back to 1986. I spent at least half my time with customers. And not only superficial, let's have coffee or a glass of beer, but what does your business do and how can I help you be as successful as possible? And again, if you're employees of our company, if I don't spend half my time with customers, you know I'm a fraud or a fake. If I do, then you know it's important to me, and if I bring a message from the customers, there's going to be an expectation that we're going to deliver. Second, and equally important, to have the most motivating work environment, where people really believe they can fulfill their career ambitions. Money is important, I would say secondary to being respected, and where results and values are being appreciated. Third, again, very important in business, superior results. The comments I would make, I'm a firm believer, if you do a great job in 1 and 2, 3 should be the natural outcome. 1 + 2 = 3. So delight customers, motivate your employees, make sure that there's a good chance to move up, and significant results. 4, to give back to communities. If you're a successful business, you can afford to give money to local colleges, local schools, people that are not as fortunate as you may be. And I think that really inspires kids that want to come to work for your company if you have some social mission above and beyond making profits, which again is very important, but it's much more than that. Next one, I was always very honest to say, look, we work way too many hours to be in business, to do anything else but to compete really hard and to try to win. We're not going to win every game, every customer, and this may be an uncomfortable place for you, but where I am, I'll give everything I have and expect the same in return. And last one, and again, this one goes back to the company values, that if your corporation has certain stated values, it is very important for you as the CEO of the business to be a role model for those values. Again, if you're not, everyone's going to know you're fake. You're an emperor without clothes. And I'll give you quick examples of General Electric. If you read some of the books, there's the 4 E's. Energy. You have the personal energy to take upon the big task. Energize others. Excite your employees, customers, suppliers. Edge. Are you disciplined enough and tough enough to make the decision when you have to make a decision? Or do you forever defer making those decisions? And very important, execute. Do you do what you say? Do you meet your commitments? So I'll give you a couple of war stories, if you will, in GE to see how those were applied. And as a young manager at that time, if you believe in those, it's very difficult for Welch or whomever you're working for to say no if you exhibit those values, and also you come up with aggressive plans. And as you know, Welch always pushed, be number 1 or number 2, globalize your businesses, and grow in services, not only products, but provide end-to-end solutions. So I always challenged my team to think the same way, and I made more than 80 acquisitions when I was with GE to fulfill the strategy. And let me give you one specific example, I think, to bring it to life. In 1992, when I was running a business in the US providing management services, fleet leasing, fleet management to corporations, I wanted to expand into Europe. I wanted to acquire Avis Leasing. And I thought would make us number one in the world, we'll expand into services, and it'll help us globalize. So I thought this would be very easy for my boss, Gary Wendt, the CEO of GE Capital, to say yes to. He said no 5 times. Over a 14-month period, I kept going back, and they kept coming up with reasons not to go for the approval of this acquisition. Finally, they gave up to say, well, we're not fully supportive, but if you want to take your career at risk, if you don't see the big guy, if you don't see Jack Welch, go ahead. So the night before the board meeting, Paolo Fresco, he used to be a vice chairman of GE, Italian guy, just wonderful person, a mentor of mine. Eventually, he became the CEO of Fiat after he retired from GE. So we have a dinner, 7, 8 of us. He says, Mike, you know Europe is a dirty word right now within GE. We made 3 LBO, leveraged buyout transactions in Europe. We lost all our money in all 3 of them. So we owe for 3. We bought this blanking blank company in Hungary, Tungsram. We were losing $100 million a year. We bought this medical business in France. We're losing $100 million a year. Europe is in recession. We have all these crazy unions and work rules in Europe. And Jack is going to tell you this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. He likes you, but there's no way he's going to approve it. So we're at dinner, and everybody is looking to see what's going to be the reaction. I said, look, Paolo, I understand what you're saying, but this will help us be number one. We'll go in services, help us globalize. I've been doing this thing for 18 months. I know what this business is going to do, so I like to have the chance to talk with a big man in the morning. It took Welch 5 minutes to approve it. And the great thing was, this is one of the more successful acquisitions. I committed. I signed in blood what we were going to deliver. We doubled the size of the company from 125,000 vehicles to 250 in 3 years. Profits were doubled as well. Very little additional expenses because we had great systems. And as a result of this, we actually opened the doors for many other GE activities in Europe. And during the 1990s, GE went from $8 billion to $24 billion in revenues as a company in Europe. So this really opened the doors for a number of other very successful promotions. One I'm very proud of, then I was appointed to be the CEO for GE Lighting in Europe. I lived in London and Budapest. The Tungsram business was losing $100 million a year. Again, it was a very inspirational acquisition for GE to go into Eastern Europe. Very unsuccessful. 3 years we turned it around from losing $100 million to making $100 million. But as opposed to discussing the financials, what I'm most proud is that we took some of the smartest Hungarian managers, young kids between ages 25 and 30. Within the 3 years, we promoted 155 to other GE businesses in Hungary, in Europe, and back in the United States. With the whole view of if you use your IQ, and education in Europe continues to be very strong, but this is the environment where you can prosper. And we're looking for people, not looking for if you're going to make mistakes, but people that can excel. So they became, again, one of the great stories, frankly, I'm most proud about is ability to take people from, in this case, Hungary, and promote those to the rest of the business. They allowed me to become the CEO of GE Lighting globally, which is the business that Thomas Edison actually started back 100 years ago. And that was my last job at GE. My family was very unhappy. When I left GE in 2000, I went from there to Motorola. Again, a great innovator in processes like Six Sigma, but also a great communications company. But when I arrived in June 2000, our market share in cell phones was down to 8%. Used to be 50 just 3 years before that. We were losing $1 billion a year. And when I started in June 1st, 2000, there was an article in Time magazine the week before, May 23rd, 2000, with headline news. It's going to take a moonshot for Motorola to make any kind of an impact on Nokia. And I always do weekly messages to employees, video or email. So my first email, I still have a hard copy of it to the employees, that said, look, I'm so delighted to be with Motorola. Great company, great history. We're in trouble right now, and nobody believes we can be successful again. And I used this quote. And an engineer, his name was Steve Larson, wrote back to me and says, Mike, welcome aboard. But what you may not realize, when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, when he spoke back on the Earth, there was a Motorola communication device that's communicating back to the earth. That there's any one company or employees that can create a moonshot is Motorola. So every time I went and spoke with people, I had used that example of how you have to believe in the darkest days of what's possible. And in the next 3 years, we made a commitment to new product innovation. We hired a number of people from Apple on the design side. So we went from 8 points of market share to 24. We went from losing $1 billion a year to making $3 billion a year. But the story of values. And when I went to Motorola, we changed the 4 E's, only made one change. As opposed to having personal energy for the first value, we changed it to envision. We thought if you're a high-tech company, it's very important for you to be able to see the future, the vision. So if you're interested in what the story behind the Razor, which is a very famous phone, I was giving 2 speeches in, I think it was New Orleans, a telecommunications event. So as I'm running between meetings, Ralph Pinney, who was the chief technical officer, was chasing me, says, Mike, I've not been sleeping. I'm just thinking, what's going to be the next moonshot for Motorola? So I think I know what I can do. He pulls out a phone. It's a typical phone. The width is 1 inch, 2.54 centimeters. If you give me 40 engineers for a year, I think we'll be able to make it narrower by actually from 2.45 centimeters down to 1. It'll take us a year. And all these new great designers you've hired from Apple, we'll be able to come up with a revolutionary phone. And here's where we're laying people off. I felt almost like Welch back 5 years ago to say, how can you say no? You're laying people off, you give a view to the organization that we're tough to be able to go through the recession at that point in time. But here's a passionate person. He's envisioning the future. So in many ways, he gave me the same passionate appeal, which I recall 5, 6 years ago making it as a young manager. We said yes, and I think the rest of it really demonstrated that there was a very, there was a smart decision. I'll give you an additional quick success story again, how you tie values and what you purportedly stand for and coming up with management decisions that are very consistent with those statements. This is Boeing. I'm a director now for 7 years. But back in the early 2000s, there's a discussion, should Boeing try to come up with a new replacement to the 747? Airbus had made a commitment, the 380, the big plane for long distance, and the popular and safe decision would have been for Boeing to defend the 747 position. And you have to give credit to the engineers that says, no, what the world's looking for is a new plane. And that's where the 787 came up, the idea. Composite, weighs 20% less, so it's fuel efficient. People hate the hub and spoke process. They say, we can have a plane that's going to fly 8,000 miles, so you can go much longer distance, travel around the world without stopping. You can afford to have very significant space in the plane to allow to have windows and much better circulation of the air. So there's a big bet made on 787. Mega success from in terms of a customer perception and reception. It's late a couple of years, which is obviously not what you want to have. But started flying last month in Japan. And this is the most well-received airplane in the history of the world. We have more than $120 billion of orders on books, completely sold out through 2018. And again, a company that says, forever new frontiers, which is the value statement for Boeing, how that really was made consistent with the actions and commitments from the employees. Last war story, if you will, and this one did not have a happy ending in many ways, is Nortel. I have many lessons learned in my life. I've tried always to apply those in new environments. And with respect to Nortel, I have never worked harder in my life. We put together a great team. We had great support from customers. And we applied all learnings from people we hired from, obviously, promotions from Nortel, but also IBM, McKinsey, Nortel, GE, and Juniper. The goal when I joined Nortel at the end of 2005 was to truly recreate a great company. How to fix a broken icon. And I'll just give you a couple statistics of Nortel was in 2000, 6 years before I came, and in the fourth quarter of 2005. Really just to show you that I was never afraid to take a big risk. In 2000, Nortel was $300 billion market cap company, one of the most valuable companies in the world. When I joined, it was down to $9 billion. So you have a 98% decline in market value. Employees from 100,000 down to 29,000, so 7% reduction. Top management was fired for cause. 7 people, they were fired for, the CEO included, were fired for fraudulent statements to investors and to the SEC. And there was a board member running the company for a year. Revenues have gone down from $30 billion down to $9 billion during those 6 years. We've been losing money every single year, both cash flow and money for 6 years. Our credit rating had gone from A to B minus. So very strong to junk bond. We had $4.5 billion in debt, the only high-tech company with more debt than cash. I know there's people here that work for Microsoft and HP, but again, we had $4.5 billion of debt and $1 billion of cash. We had $2.5 billion pension deficit, with 2 additional lawsuits from investors for $30 billion. Productivity was only 2-3% a year, so very low. Customer satisfaction was very poor. And most worrisome, we were losing market share to competition, particularly 2 Chinese players, ZTE and Huawei. So there was the environment, and we thought, just like at Motorola, we're going to point to the moon and try to get the organization excited. And frankly, 2006-07 and the first half of 2008 were outstanding. I mean, we grew the business from $9 to $11 billion. We were profitable at the operating level at 2006-07 and the first half of 2008. We're making big investments for Vodafone, Verizon told us we are the best 4th generation network, the so-called LTE, long-term evolution, the best optical products. Our productivity had gone from 3 to 16% a year. And although we're still lacking in size, I mean, there's a view in the industry, certainly was mine, that within a couple of years, we'd be able to start acquiring much bigger companies than we were. We thought with the operating platform to go from the smallest company to actually to be the one that's going to acquire many businesses. But then the world turned upside down. As you know what happened in 2008, revenues come down by 20 or 30%. If you're the smallest player without a balance sheet, our options were eliminated. So very painful, as opposed to being the company that acquires other businesses. We filed for protection, and we actually sold the businesses to other companies. Well-run, but small businesses. And I mean, that's in 3 minutes, that's a summary at Nortel. 2 big lessons. And one, you cannot afford to have, I mean, it's very risky to have high debt and high leverage for a company in a cyclical environment or in a high-tech business. And second lesson learned is that it takes much longer to turn around a company that's been in decline for a long period of time. I mean, Nortel was in decline for 6 years. If I'm looking at Motorola or some of the other turnarounds within GE, maybe it's within a 1 or 2 year decline. It's much faster to give people the confidence, you were here a couple of years ago, and this is what we can do to turn it around. So if you have a really tough situation, years or decades of decline, it's fixable. It's going to take much longer time to do that. So again, I can go on for a long time, but overall takeaway on leadership values and your commitment to them. If you apply those, you're giving yourself and your team the best chance of success. Is that going to work every time? Absolutely not. I mean, life doesn't work that way. Sports do not work that way. But if you do not behave that way, your chance of success is 0. If you apply it, it's going to work out most of the time, not all the time. But the importance for, if you have the passion, the desire to be the best you can, what do you learn from each situation, and how do you apply those situations going forward? So again, hopefully this was useful on the lessons learned. Let me quickly move on to the third topic, my thoughts with respect to the current economic situation. This will be rather quick. I'm usually an optimist, but frankly, in this environment, there's not any good news any place in the world right now. And I'll come up with some comments at the end. I don't think we'll last much longer, but right now, Western Europe and US are not providing the kind of a leadership that is required from the developed world. There's too much debt and leverage, particularly at the government level, and there's a very poor political climate. It's much easier to attack as opposed to have solutions for going forward. I think for businesses here, it's important to recognize that the last 3 or 4 years actually have been very good for corporations. Not great, don't get me wrong, but many companies have used this environment to really become much stronger. Whether that's better processes, better systems, taking cost out, saving cash for the future. And if you haven't done that, my suggestion is for you to do that. So there's the political environment, and I'll just say, making commitments that governments cannot fulfill. And many of the best companies in the world have taken this environment the last 2 or 3 years to really become much stronger operationally, which positions them well for the future. Developing countries have seen most of the growth in the last 5, 6 years. I think that's going to continue. And what's required in this environment? Leadership, boldness, and practicality. Combination of all 3 of those by government, people, and businesses. I'm confident that better times are going to come, but it's going to be 2 or 3 years from now. I wish I could give you a better story. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it's going to happen faster. But I think some painful adjustments, whether it's in Greece, whether it's the debt levels in the United States. But some correction is going to happen to give business the confidence to make investments for the future. On your 4th request, if you will, and this is actually very close to heart, is that a few personal thoughts of what's important for developing countries to do to stimulate growth and to provide the environment for companies to become more competitive on a global basis. And I'll just give you 3 comments, and I'll drill down. One is that to ensure there's an attractive environment for foreign investment. Second, there's a commitment to improve the competitiveness of local companies and to promote entrepreneurship. And I'll come to the punchline here. You have to have both to be successful. I've done business all over the world. I've not seen a single successful developing country that's not been able to both attract business, investment in the country, and has been able to generate enthusiasm for strong local companies. So you really need both of those. And third, try to engage the diaspora, people like myself. And I hope there's a violent agreement in this room that the economy and economic development should be the forefront of thinking of all governments. Bill Clinton won 2 terms as US president. Obviously, he was very successful on many fronts. But there's always the reminder, it is the economy, stupid. So whenever he got confused and started thinking maybe broader themes, he knew unless he had the economy working, he may as well forget all those other activities. So if President Obama wants to get reelected, or I would argue any political leader in a democracy, unless they remember their very simple statement, they'll be for a big disappointment and unhappy people. Maybe the only exception is President Putin, but I'd say most democracies, unless you pay attention to the economy, that you'll not be a very popular leader. And that doesn't end there, but again, without it, your options are very limited. So in terms of attracting foreign investment, I heard a few of the comments from a previous panel. Now look, I'll try to make it summarize, but I've been personally invested decision, the General Electric particularly at Motorola, to make investments and open up factories in Turkey, in China, India, Hungary, Northern Ireland, Singapore, Israel, Egypt, South Africa, Germany, Poland, and also a very collaborative distributor operations in Serbia and Macedonia. So I know what I'm looking for is pretty consistent to what other CEOs would look at if they want to invest in Serbia, Slovenia, Croatia, or any other country. I mean, top of the list is the political stability in the country. They're going to speak with Tadic or with the presidents, again, from other countries. Can I believe that person? Does he get it? And if he gets replaced, with the next government live up to the commitments that they've been made to me? Is there eager and productive workforce? And education does not equal eager and productive workforce. Is the infrastructure okay? Not only physical, but mobile communications, fixed line communications. Is the market opportunity significant enough on its own or to other markets? what is the experience from current investors? If I call them, and not only the people they're going to tell me to call, if there's 10 investors here, and you tell me call those 3 people, I would call the other 7, just to make sure that they're pleased with their investments. Are there competitive tax rates? Is there a commitment to the rule of law? Is there protection for IP? So it's a long and challenging list, but today's companies have choices where to invest, just like companies here do. And unless you're able to fulfill those requirements, then the companies will not come here. And I think that's very important, not the only thing, but it is important as a step of becoming a successful economy. Second, and equally important, commitment to competitiveness of local companies. And I said before, I have not seen a single successful country without having that balance. Here the government must pay the same level of attention to local businesses as they do to attracting foreign investment. But here's a big qualifier. I mean, personal views, and I had a wonderful discussion with President Tadic last night when I came from Chicago. The government plays a very important role, but should be mostly as an enabler. And my strong personal opinion and experience is that central planning does not work. Try to pick winners and losers does not work at the central level. Protecting local monopolies does not work. And also, the fatal flaw, high government spending typically does not work. If anything, that adds to the challenges of the economy, and also regulations. There's this insatiable appetite by politicians to look for quote unquote people that to either punish or to have all rules and laws that actually are a very significant burden to business creation. And the last comment, engaging diaspora. Let me give you a personal reason what prompted my involvement in that process. Is in 2002, I've been just promoted to become the new president of Motorola. There's a phone call in the office. My secretary chases me and says, the president of Macedonia is on the phone to you to congratulate you. And here I am, again, this is in 2003. I'm supposedly a proud former Yugoslav, proud Macedonian now. I always say that right when I introduce myself. I don't know who the president of Macedonia is. So it says, maybe I've been saying one thing and really not living up to that. Was President Boris Zafirovski became a good friend. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years later. He asked me to come, met with his cabinet a few times. It simply was an open discussion of my experiences and what can the government and businesses to be able to do in the country. A couple of years later, in 2006, 2007, a few of us started Macedonia 2025. It's a not-for-profit organization, not politically aligned, and again, our only goal is to, and nothing is expected in return. We're not investing, we're not looking to make money, we're not trying to benefit from changing property laws, but simply the pride, if we can help where we grew up to become more successful in the region, if necessary, to become part of EU and NATO. And I mean, the goals are relatively simple, to try to help attract foreign investment. I mean, as an example, Dave Cody, the CEO of Honeywell, used to be a colleague at General Electric. We had organized for him to come and have dinner with Prime Minister Gruevski. Lots of those are long-term discussions. Whether Honeywell invest in Macedonia or not, we don't know. Kemet Electronics, before they made a decision, they asked to speak with me. The Macedonian team had done a great job. Victor Mizo is here. Victor is in the back, president. He's the CEO for Invest in Macedonia. And part of the reason for his job was actually when Prime Minister Gruevski asked me, Mike, when you've seen other countries, who does the best job of organizing their capabilities to market to foreign investors? I told him Turkey. I was very impressed with what Prime Minister Erdogan had done. And there was a person he hired as the direct report to him to coordinate all of the activities within Turkey to be able to make sales presentations, if you will. So Victor has been very effective to try to bring all the capabilities of Macedonia when they speak with companies like Johnson Control, Johnson Matthey. Also try to provide some coaching to local businesses. Again, this is not a solution, but simply try to advance their thinking of what's possible. And also try to be thoughtful in making recommendations to the government to have the types of laws and regulations that respect the rule of law, but also minimize bureaucracy and try to promote the type of education to be helpful for the economy for the years and decades to come. So really the question here is to say that if you have not been open to getting engaged with the diaspora, there's many successful Serbians, Croats, Slovenians all over the world. I mean, it's a very free, very easy gesture on both sides to be able to organize it. Let me finish up with some recommendations in this environment for you. Is if I was running business today, and I'm not, so I'll try not to be too dramatic, but I would make a couple assumptions. First of all, I would assume that the turmoil will continue for at least a couple more years. In other words, I would not bet significantly on massive GDP growth. And I would remember the size of my markets are relatively small. And as important as they made to my company, to think where else should I be investing? And I looked at this, the GDP of the world, this is 2009 statistics, is $60 trillion. EU is 16 trillion, US is 16 trillion. If you look at Serbia, Slovenia, Croatia, they're about between 45 and 60 billion. So you're less than 1% of the global economy, less than 1%. You put all three of you together, still 2.5% and 3%. But then look at Italy, $2.3 trillion. Romania, 160 trillion, Hungary, 124 trillion. Most successful small countries, Holland, Sweden, they obviously very efficient locally, but they do lots of their most prosperous growth by thinking, growing globally, starting with the countries right next to you. So if you're not thinking globalization, if you're not thinking how to expand your business, you're probably missing your biggest opportunity to grow. So the specific recommendations, as frustrated as you may be with the government and with lots of ills in the world, I mean, I would manage the things which you can control. And as a CEO, there's an enormous amount of activities you can control, balance sheet costs for starters. Second, I'll use this environment to really help my company be the best ever to prepare for the future. I think many of the best companies have already done that, but I really encourage you to do that. Think and grow experts would be the third specific recommendation. And I'll just give you a couple of small examples of companies which I helped start or encourage growing when I was with Motorola. One is in Vladicom, and this is a company in Serbia. And they used to be principally a Motorola distributor. Right now, they have 300 employees, 5 PhDs. Their revenues have gone to $80 million, and they think they can be $500 million business in 5 years. 5% of their revenues are in Serbia, 95% outside, mostly the Middle East and Africa. They've been able to use some of the former relationships that Serbia and Yugoslavia used to have. They bring end-to-end solutions with local engineers, and they're growing globally. And I thought it was a fantastic example of what's possible to be able to do from here. And in Macedonia, we started a small distribution company back in 2005. They'd be able to expand out to 50 employees. And only 15% of their business is in Macedonia. Most of it is in neighboring countries. So again, two small examples from personal experiences that what's possible to be able to help you keep what you have and grow it exponentially. And last one, invest in leadership, starting with your own. I mean, this is never too late, whether you're a 25 or a 50-year-old executive, to keep getting better, to be able to use your employees as the source of a growth and competitive advantage for many years to come. I love coming back in this region. I think what you're having as a goal for the conference are absolutely spot on. I think the opportunities here are very good. You have the cost structure, you have a central location, there's a population, there's a strong desire for strong relevance, and there's a work ethic that still, I think, is second to none. But that work ethic has to get stimulated, has to get inspired, and that, frankly, is the job of the CEOs. I applaud what you're doing. To be known as among the top 100 business leaders in this region is frankly, very good testament to what you've been able to accomplish at this point in time. And I wish you well in the years and decades ahead. So thank you for inviting me. I look forward to any questions which you may have.